JT Miller is the new captain of the New York Rangers. We tell you why this was an excellent choice.
You're Locked on the New York Rangers, your daily podcast on the New York Rangers. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome back, Blue Shirts fans, to episode number 1381 of the Locked On New York Rangers podcast. I'm your host, John Chick. Just want to thank you guys, as always, for making Locked On New York Rangers your first listen every day. We are free and available on all platforms, including YouTube. And today's episode of Locked On New York Rangers is brought to you by FanDuel. Download the FanDuel app right now by visiting FanDuel.com and win $300 in bonus bets if your first $5 bet wins. And we are, of course, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. So some very exciting breaking news in Rangerland just a little bit earlier this morning. JT Miller has indeed been named the captain of the New York Rangers, the 29th captain in team history to be exact. And I know that there's going to be some mixed feelings on this. Some people are going to love this move. Some people are going to not like this move at all. Some people might be, somewhere in between as well. I personally, for one, do think this is the right call. I do think this is the right way to go for several reasons. I'll go ahead and lay those out for you guys. Some of you, the everydayers, you probably know where I'm going with this because I've been saying all along, JT Miller, by a little bit over Vincent Trocheck, was my top choice, my personal preference to become the next captain of the New York Rangers. But we'll talk about the reasons why I like this move. We'll also acknowledge the candidacy, I guess we could say, of guys like Vincent Trocheck, maybe even Adam Fox as well. And we've got another adjustment to the alternate captains, and we'll get into that toward the end of today's episode. But for right now, once again, JT Miller, the new captain of the New York Rangers, and I like this move for several reasons. The first one that kind of stands out right away, very, very simple fact that JT Miller, quite clearly, is one of the best players on the New York Rangers. Now, being the best player on the team, that's not a prerequisite for being named captain. There's examples of this all over the NHL, other sports at different levels. I'm sure, it does come down to leadership more than anything else. You don't necessarily need, the absolute best player or one of the absolute best players to be the captain of your team. And I understand that, but I still do think that when somebody is inherently just one of the best all-around players on your team, other players are just going to very naturally gravitate toward that player. And I think there's already some of that going on with JT Miller. We saw a little bit of that with Mika Zibanejad this past season. Mika obviously played a heck of a lot better once JT Miller was reacquired by the Rangers. And once Mika joined his line, he's playing right wing on the line centered by JT Miller. So the very simple fact that, again, one of the better players on the team, he can, lead by example in that way. And again, players do kind of tend to gravitate toward the most talented player or players on a team. I think also something that really stands out for me as far as why JT Miller is my top pick, the style of play. We've been talking about how certainly last season that the Rangers need to play a little bit more of a straight line brand of hockey. They need to play with a little bit more physicality, a little bit more snarl, a little bit more nastiness, a little bit more bleep you. They need to be a team that, just generally speaking, is more difficult to play against. And I don't think there's anybody on this Ranger roster that embodies that better than JT Miller. He is full steam ahead. When they traded for him last season, it was really striking just how differently he played the game than a lot of his Ranger teammates did, because, again, it is that straight line hockey. It is that aggressive forechecking kind of hockey. It's that physicality. It's everything. He's just a tremendous all-around player, and he's one of those guys that's going to leave it all out on the ice every time he's out there. And that brings me to my next point. Another reason why I like JT being named the next captain is the compete level. Now, high compete level, in some ways, every player in the NHL possesses it, right? Because if they weren't at least somewhat competitive, they wouldn't have made it this far. I mean, talent can get you pretty far. I don't know that it can carry you all the way to the NHL if you don't have something inside of you that, you want to be better than the guy that you're playing against, right? It's really as simple as that. But when you watch this Ranger team last season and you look at the Rangers relative to the teams that they were playing, it's pretty obvious that the Rangers' compete level was something of an issue this past season. You can say what you want about JT Miller, and he is a guy that's had his ups and downs, and he's had some issues, different stops along his career, and we're going to address those in just a second. But one thing you cannot take away from JT Miller is how much this guy cares, how much that he leaves it on the ice every single time that he's out there. He competes on every shift like it's his last. He goes out there and, wants to bang bodies and wants to make a positive impact for his team. He wants nothing more than to win. And again, these are all things that in a lot of ways should go without saying. But when you watch the Rangers last year, you watch how many games they basically just, were away on vacation or whatever was going on there. You guys know just as well as I do that the compete level for this Ranger team was not where it needed to be for the vast majority of last season. JT Miller is here to fix that. You trade for him to obviously give your team a boost in general, but it's more than that. It's about the style of play. It's about the intensity of play. And, that's the kind of guy that, for me at least, you name the captain of your team. And that's obviously exactly what the New York Rangers have done as of just a couple of hours ago here this morning on Tuesday. I think another reason is, to me, and again, we're going to address the other candidates in just a second, other guys that maybe could have worn the C for the Rangers. But to me, you look at this entire group of players here, the entire bunch, JT Miller just feels like the natural born leader out of all of them. And granted, we don't see everything that goes on behind the scenes, but we do watch these games and we do see how they interact with each other on the bench, on the ice and whatnot. We do see their post-game interviews, their pre-game interviews. JT Miller to me just seems like the guy that's no nonsense, no BS, tells it like it is. And describing whether it's JT Miller or any player that I'm describing like that, that sounds like a breath of fresh air, because I did think last season there were a little bit too many excuses coming from the Ranger locker room, or, maybe excuses is too harsh of a word, but there were too many times where it felt like the Rangers were just kind of shrugging things off and, oh yeah, we got to be better. Yes, you do have to be better. So let's see it in the next game. And it just felt like it never really happened. The Rangers never really turned a corner last season. There were instances where, they played some good games, right? And there were brief stretches of good hockey for the Rangers last season, but not nearly enough. And I think one of the reasons for that, many reasons, but one of the big reasons, a lack of leadership. There's not going to be, I don't think, a lack of leadership with JT Miller essentially now, in control of this team. And another reason I would want JT Miller to be the captain over anybody else that, was in the running this season is that JT Miller was not here on the New York Rangers when these guys essentially quit on their season last year. You guys saw when everything fell apart. It started happening in November. It obviously bled into December. January, they started to get it going a little bit. But for November and December, the vast majority of those 2 months, it is some of the most atrocious, most brutal hockey you will ever see the New York Rangers, or any team for that matter, play over that long of a stretch. It's one thing if you're not winning. Teams do go through slumps and they go through scoring droughts and whatnot, and players will go through funks, but it just looked like everybody on this team wanted to be anywhere else on the planet but playing hockey for the New York Rangers. And I know there's a lot of love out there for Vincent Trocheck. There's a lot of people that want him to be the captain. And I know, there's some love for Adam Fox too. There were some people that wanted Fox to be the captain. They were both here for all that. And Adam Fox was wearing a letter. Vincent Trocheck was not. But he had very firmly established himself as one of the veteran leaders of this team over the past couple of seasons. And again, the lack of leadership, the lack of accountability, it was shocking. We saw it last season. I'm not laying it all at the feet of Vincent Trocheck and Adam Fox. It was everybody, certainly guys wearing letters, but up, down, top, back, left, right, whatever. The entire team just was not putting forth the kind of effort. They didn't even look like they cared for big chunks of last season. And that is a problem. JT Miller wasn't here for all that. JT Miller was traded for, and the Rangers made a little bit of a run at it. It looked like they could get back into the playoffs. They actually did very briefly. They were by themselves for that second wild card spot, and they fell out of it just as quickly. I think by then it was just too little too late. The damage was done, and it was basically a lost season. And hopefully JT Miller being the captain, he's going to make sure to demand a lot out of this team and make sure they don't go down a similar path this upcoming season, because nobody stopped it from happening last season. Nobody that was here at the start of last season was able to stop the Rangers from getting into this rut, this funk, this collective just kind of malaise that we saw from this team last season. Nobody stepped up. Nobody righted the ship. Nobody said, guys, jump on my back, follow my lead tonight. There was none of that last season. And JT Miller is one of the few guys that you can't blame for that during November and December, because he was not here. They had yet to reacquire JT Miller at that time. Now, I will also acknowledge, because I know there's some people that aren't happy about this move, it certainly does come with at least some risk. JT Miller, let's be honest here, he's dealt with some immaturity in the past in his career. We remember back during his first tenure with the Rangers, him and Henrik Lundqvist got into it a little bit during a TV timeout, a play stoppage. They were arguing a little bit. A couple of days later, JT Miller is the next Ranger. Now, granted, the Rangers were rebuilding at that time, and they were shipping away veteran players, but JT Miller, his name wasn't really at the top of the list. I don't think that people really saw that one coming. Certainly, they were going to trade guys, like Zuccarello. Ryan McDonough was obviously traded, a whole bunch of other guys as well. But it was a little bit surprising when JT Miller was traded. And then obviously, Miller and Pettersson in Vancouver, they had their issues for a couple of seasons there, and it got to the point where it was like, well, this locker room ain't big enough for the two of us, and we see JT Miller traded back to the New York Rangers. So Miller, very clearly, very fiery, very emotional player. But here's what I'm hoping, and I get the feeling the Rangers might be hoping for something similar because, again, we'll be honest here, this decision to make him the captain, it is not without some risk. But JT Miller, we've talked about his immaturity in the past, emotions getting the better of him at times, maybe. He is also now 32 years old. So you got to believe that he's matured at least a little bit. I got a feeling that the Rangers probably are thinking the same thing. He's into his early 30s now. He's been in this league for a long time. He's been through some ups and downs with basically every team that he's ever played with. But now I think the Rangers are hoping, and I certainly am, that he can kind of harness those emotions, harness that fire, harness that intensity, still use it to his advantage, but not let it be to his detriment, and use it as a way to motivate the guys and lead the guys and essentially say, follow me, boys. Because that's when you're the captain, that's basically your role. You're leading the way on and off the ice, and you can be a vocal leader, but there's a lot of lead by example in there as well. I also feel like, when you're the captain of the New York Rangers, there's a certain amount of pressure that comes with that. There's a certain amount of responsibility, maybe some added weight that comes with that. To me, when you look at this Ranger roster right now, I do feel like JT Miller is better equipped to handle that than anybody else. And again, I don't know any of these guys personally. And as I mentioned before, we don't see everything that goes on behind the scenes. But just looking at the surface, JT Miller feels like that dude. I mean, he's been around for a long time. He just got back to New York, but he was with us for a bunch of seasons in the past. And I think he's ready for this. And I think he is the best choice. And we've already seen the kind of impact that JT Miller can make on a team. Last season, coming back to the New York Rangers, 32 games. He ends up with 13 goals, 22 assists, so more than a point per game, 76 hits. He's out there throwing his weight around like we want to see from the New York Ranger captain. Blocked 22 shots, 157.6% of his faceoffs as well. This guy walked into a dumpster fire last year and still succeeded, still produced points at an elite level, and also got Mika Zibanejad to snap out of his season-long coma and actually start playing some hockey. Again, these are all traits that I look for in a captain. This, to me, feels like somebody that needs to be the captain. And I think he's going to be a good influence on his teammates going forward. I mentioned Mika a second ago. The younger guys, we've talked a lot on here, and certainly we're not the only ones. I think every Ranger fan feels this way. But you look at the young Ranger forwards, the guys that are coming along, the guys that are very young right now, and all have a chance, at least a chance, to be there on opening night for the Rangers. The big three, as we've called them, Brian Hoffman, Gabe Perreault, Brett Berard. Do not sleep on the idea that JT Miller might end up on a line with one of those guys or both of those guys at various points in the season. I still favor putting JT Miller with Mika Zibanejad. I just like that combination last season. But JT Miller is one of those guys, for a younger player on the team, they might gravitate to him a little bit. And if you want to encourage them to play the right style of hockey, you can just point at JT Miller and say, watch him, do what he does. And, you look at somebody like Brian Hoffman. I mean, in a best case scenario, in a perfect world for all of us Ranger fans, Hoffman is basically JT Miller Jr. You can see similar build, right? Similar combination of skill and physicality. I know Brian Hoffman didn't light up the score sheet last season. I get that. I'm still encouraged by what he did in the 2 rookie games against the Flyers. Obviously, he's still got to do it in the NHL. But Brian Hoffman, I mean, if he can be anything like JT Miller, then that's going to be a good thing. Do the two of them end up on a line at one point? That's possible. Somebody like Gabe Perreault, you want to really put him in position to succeed right away, whether that's at the start of the season or midway through the season, whatever it might be. Stick him on a line with JT Miller. I mean, I really like that idea. I mean, Miller's obviously a skilled player, but you think about like the physicality and the nastiness. He can do all the dirty work, set up Gabe Perreault for success right out of the starting block. So I really like the pick, as I'm sure a lot of you guys can tell by now. But in just a second, we're going to we're going to stay on the same topic here. We're talking about JT Miller for the whole episode being named the captain, but I do want to acknowledge a couple of other options, a couple of other candidates for the New York Rangers as far as guys that could have been the captain. And I'm sure, again, they have their supporters out there that are watching this, listening to this, whatever it might be. So we will discuss those players in just a second. All right, we just want to take a minute to let everybody know that today's episode of Locked On New York Rangers is brought to you by Monarch Money. Most people cannot name all their financial accounts or even what they are worth, whether it's 401ks, properties, or investments. And when you don't have the full picture, you can end up leaving money on the table. That's why there is Monarch Money. It's an all-in-one personal finance tool that brings your entire financial life together in one clean, easy-to-use interface on your laptop or on your phone. Monarch is built for people with busy lives. If you've put off organizing your finances, Monarch is for you. Monarch does the heavy lifting for you. You can link all your accounts in minutes, see clear data visuals, get smart categorization of your spending, and finally feel in control of your money without ever touching a spreadsheet. Don't let financial opportunity slip through the cracks. Use code LOCKEDONNHL at monarchmoney.com in your browser for half off of your first year. That's 50% off your first year at monarchmoney.com with code LOCKEDONNHL. All right, we just want to thank everybody, as always, for supporting Locked On New York Rangers. Big shout out to the everydayers, as always, for continuing to tune in throughout the offseason, the preseason, the postseason. Wherever we are, you guys continue to show up, and I can't thank you guys enough for that. And for the everydayers, stay with the show. We're back to 5 episodes per week, as I'm sure a lot of you are already aware. We've got Will Cooley, best and worst case scenarios. That episode is on the way. We're probably going to push that back yet another day, though, because there's some other things going on. Obviously, Miller named the captain. We're going to talk about that today. We're going to continue talking about that. But also, Kaprizov trade rumors. Want to get to that. There's also the end of rookie camp. Would like to share a couple final thoughts about that. And the unfortunate passing of Ranger legend Eddie Giacomin. So definitely want to talk about him as well. And we'll do that in the next episode. But for right now, let's go ahead and continue talking about JT Miller and him being named the captain. I'm going to go ahead and read a statement from Chris Drury on the selection of Miller as the Ranger captain. And then we'll get to some other options, where there are other guys that should be wearing the C or could have been wearing the C. We'll get to that as well. But this comes to us from Chris Drury this morning. We're pleased to announce JT Miller as the new captain of the New York Rangers. Since his arrival last season, JT immediately became a leader for our group and exemplifies how we want to conduct ourselves both on and off the ice. Congratulations to JT and his entire family on an incredibly meaningful achievement, and we're confident he will continue to represent our organization with class, commitment, and integrity. Yeah, look, so far so good. I mean, like we said, he has had some hiccups, throughout his career, and there's been times where, his emotions maybe have gotten the better of him, but he was a model citizen, obviously, coming back to the Rangers this past season, and it certainly did look like he very quickly stepped right into a leadership role without any qualms about it. So, obviously, again, I do like the pick. I'll be honest, we got to start. We're going to get to the candidates, the other captain candidates, but just the decision to name a captain kind of caught me by surprise. You guys let me know what you think about this in the comment section or send me an email or whatever, however you want to get in touch with me. But I didn't think the Rangers were going to go there. And the later it got into this offseason, the closer we got to the start of training camp, but the closer we got to the start of the preseason. We've got a preseason game just 5 days from now on Sunday against the Devils. The longer this continued to drag out and there wasn't really a whole lot of news on the subject, the more I figured, they're probably just going to go into the season without a captain. They'll let everything play out. Obviously, Mike Sullivan is in his first season with the New York Rangers, so maybe he would want to see how these guys interact with each other before they slap the C on somebody. We did see something very similar when Gerard Gallant was named the coach a couple of seasons back, and it was his first year, and they didn't name a captain, and they had 6 alternate captains, which, people had some jokes about that, but you can understand why, a first-year head coach might want to hold off for a season. It's a little bit different this time around, though, because Sullivan has coached Miller in the past. The two of them were together for Team USA at the Four Nations this past spring, rather. There was a little bit of an overlap between Sullivan and JT Miller during both of their first 10 years with the Rangers. At the time, Sullivan was an assistant coach for John Tortorella, and that was JT Miller's rookie season. So these two clearly know each other. They've clearly been around for a while. I mean, Sullivan coached the Penguins for half an eternity, and JT Miller's been in the league for a long time as well. But even still, I didn't think they would name a captain. With that said, I'm glad that they did. I like the bold move. First of all, the bold move to name a captain. Secondly, the bold move to make it JT Miller. I'm typically in favor of the Rangers being a little bit bold when the opportunity presents itself, because I think one championship in 85 years, that'll sort of do that to you as a fan base. You'll want a team to get bold. You'll want a team to get aggressive, and you'll want a team to roll the dice. And I feel like that's what this is, naming JT Miller the captain of the New York Rangers. Now, were there some other options? Yes, there were. As we just mentioned, you could have opted to go through the season without a captain. I think in that scenario, we would have still seen JT Miller become an alternate. Vincent Trocheck, as he was just a minute ago, would have probably been named an alternate as well. But regardless, I still do like the idea of immediately being bold, making JT Miller the captain. Now, Vincent Trocheck was also an option. But again, I did see, and you all saw it too, some very, very disturbing game film put on tape by the New York Rangers this past season. again, it's one thing to go through a lull. It's one thing to go through a scoring slump, or it's one thing to go through a little bit of a losing streak, or maybe there's games where you're just not having any puck luck and you come up a little bit short in a game that you feel you should have won. That's not why the Rangers were losing games last season. The Rangers were losing games last season for a whole score of reasons, but first and foremost, the very simple fact that they were not showing up for these games. They had no enthusiasm, no energy to play hockey. Whether you like it or not, Vincent Trocheck was a part of that. I'm not saying he was the main culprit. I'm not saying he was more to blame than this guy or that guy or the other guy over there. But the bottom line is he was part of that, and he didn't do enough to get the Rangers out of it. Nobody on the team did, but Vincent Trocheck is one of them. There's another point I'd like to make about Vincent Trocheck that I don't think too many people are talking about, and I don't want this to be taken as, he wants Vincent Trocheck to be traded, because I don't. I don't want Trocheck traded. But that is something that could happen in the coming years. Now, you might hear that and think, like, why would you do that? Vincent Trocheck's been a productive player. He's stepped up in a leadership role, at least at times, and he's signed for a very reasonable cost of $5.625 million per season over the next 4 years. That is all true, but that also is the reason why he would be attractive to other teams. When you look at the Ranger roster right now and you look up and down, all the different salaries and whatnot, and you try to figure out, like, who could the Rangers move if they had to open up some cap space? There's not really a ton of players there, but Vincent Trocheck is at least one of them. I think you get a lot in return for him. And if you want the Rangers to make a run at somebody like Connor McDavid or Kirill Kaprizov, and you want the Rangers to re-sign Panarin beyond this upcoming season, that money's got to come from somewhere. And it might be very, very difficult to pull that off without shedding at least some salary cap space, whether that's now, whether that's, after this upcoming season. I mean, it's not going to be now. They just named him the alternate captain. But when you look at Trocheck, the other thing, too, is he's one of the very few players on this team, or at least one of the very few prominent players on this team, that is not protected by significant no trade clauses or full no move clauses. Now, he does have, for this season and the upcoming season, a 12-team no trade list. Then the season after that, it's a 10-team no trade list. And then the season after that, it is a 6-team no trade list. The bottom line is, for the 4 years combined, Vincent Trocheck he does have some no trade protection, but not a whole lot of it. So again, I'm not campaigning for him to be traded. I don't want that to happen at all. He's been one of my favorite players on the Rangers ever since he's gotten here. Even before he was a Ranger, he was one of my, more favorite players around the NHL, just like his all-around game. But again, if you want to make enough cap space for somebody like Connor McDavid or Kirill Kaprizov or Jack Eichel or Adrian Kempe, the money has to come from somewhere. It could be from Vincent Trocheck. I'm just throwing that out there as a possibility, because if the Rangers have a similar thought, if they are seeing the writing on the wall and they feel like they might have to move Trocheck at some point, they don't want to name him the captain right now. Do you really want another situation where a dude is named the captain and then shown the door a season or two from now? I don't think the Rangers want that either. JT Miller is going to be here. He's going to be here very likely throughout the entire duration of his contract. And, you don't make a move like that for JT Miller last season if you're not committed to building around him. And again, please understand, I don't want Vincent Trocheck traded, not in the slightest. I'm just acknowledging the possibility that could happen a couple of years down the road if the Rangers need some cap space. The other big name, as far as like a candidate for the Rangers to be the next captain, would be Adam Fox. Never really saw him as the captain. I mean, I had JT Miller as my number 1 pick. Vincent Trocheck not too far behind him at number 2. Fox is probably number 3 for me, but I would have had him down the list a little bit. There's a pretty big drop off for me from Trocheck to Fox, because I just don't see him as the captain. And again, I don't know him personally. And again, I can't stress this enough. We don't see everything that happens behind closed doors, but I don't look at Adam Fox as like the big rah-rah guy. And, there's beat reporters and whatnot that are in the Ranger locker room and they see these guys interacting with each other. And I feel like the general consensus among all of them, they would tend to agree with that. That Fox, certainly he's a tremendously important player for this Ranger team, and he's at least in somewhat of a leadership role, but he's not going to be the guy that's going to get in your face, that's going to do the big rah-rah speech and all that kind of stuff that a captain's going to need to do from time to time. I compare Adam Fox a little bit to Brian Leetch, although Leetch, I would say, I was probably more on board with him being the captain than I would have been for Adam Fox, because at least with Leetch, he'd been there a while. I mean, Fox has been here a while too, but Leetch had won a Stanley Cup with the Rangers. He was always sort of Messier's right-hand man. Him and Adam Graves are the 2 alternates of those teams. And I don't think the Rangers really had a whole lot of other great options once Mark Messier left. So that all being the case, Leetch made some sense. But Adam Fox, I mean, to me, he just wasn't the best choice. And if you're a Fox fan, certainly I respect the opinion and whatnot. But to me, I just wasn't keen on him being the captain. Totally cool with him remaining an alternate, though. So again, JT Miller, my top choice. A term I used to describe the Rangers this past season was a rudderless ship. I think that fits very, very well for this team. They just kind of drifted through the season without any direction, without any identity, without any consistency, without any effort on certain nights, way too many nights where there just was not any effort. And so to me, the thing you do, you make the bold move, you name a new captain, and you make it JT Miller, the guy that's going to get in your face and tell you like how it needs to be if the occasion calls for it. So those are my thoughts. In just a second, there was a little bit of a shakeup as far as the alternate captains for the Rangers. We've got a new alternate captain. That will be Vincent Trocheck. We'll talk about that decision in just a second. All right, we just want to take a minute to let everybody know that today's episode of Locked On New York Rangers is brought to you by FanDuel. The NFL season is here, and FanDuel is making sure you are ready for kickoff with a can't-miss offer. Right now, new customers can bet just $5, and if your bet wins, you will get $300 in bonus bets to use across the app. FanDuel is the best because it's got something for you no matter how you like to bet. You've got player props, you can build a same-game parlay, or you can even jump in live as the action is unfolding. It makes every game more exciting, whether you're watching your team or just keeping an eye on your fantasy lineup. It is quick, it is easy, and it is the best way to add a little more energy to Sundays. So are you ready to play? Download the FanDuel app right now by visiting FanDuel.com to get started. That's FanDuel.com to place your first $5 bet. All right, let's go ahead and wrap up today's episode of Locked On New York Rangers by acknowledging a couple of other changes. I mean, I guess in a way, it's just one change, but the collective decision to go with 4 alternate captains for this next season by the New York Rangers. And those 4 alternate captains will be as follows: Adam Fox, Mika Zibanejad, Artemi Panarin. Those 3 all return to their previous alternate captaincy roles. And now you've got a 4th alternate captain, and that would be Vincent Trocheck. Now, do we really need 5 players wearing letters? Probably not, but this is the New York Rangers, and this is basically how it's gone over the last handful of seasons. You know, maybe this last season notwithstanding, because, well, I mean, even this last season, they had a lot of guys wearing letters at the start of the season. Now, once the offseason began, by then you were down Jacob Trouba, and Kreider finished last season with the Rangers, but he was traded. So at that point, you're down to just Mika, Fox, and Panarin wearing letters. But the Rangers said, don't you worry about that. We'll throw a couple more letters on some guys. And obviously now JT Miller is the captain, and Vincent Trocheck has been added to the ranks as alternate captain. So we'll start with Trocheck here, and then we'll work our way to the decision by the Rangers to keep the other 3 in their alternate captain roles, because there's a lot of Ranger fans who were completely fed up with what happened last season. I completely understand that. I'm right in that same boat with you. And there were those of us that threw out the idea of maybe moving on from some of these guys, at least as alternate captains, not necessarily trading them. A lot of them have full no move clauses, but you move on and you go a different direction as far as the leadership group is concerned. So we'll talk about that in a second. But as far as Trocheck, look, I think if you're going to add an alternate captain this season, Vincent Trocheck was probably the way to go. You know, you could make the case maybe if you want to go with a little bit of a youth movement, you could throw maybe Will Cooley's name into the hat. He would make some sense. I do think Cooley will eventually wear a letter for the Rangers, especially with the way that they give out letters like Halloween candy, right? There's always 5 guys, you know, captain and 4 alternates or 6 alternates or whatever it might be. But I think, you know, Trocheck is the guy that just made the most sense. He's the veteran. He's somebody that was in the running to be the next captain of the New York Rangers. And that was actually confirmed by Vince Mercogliano on Twitter not too long ago. The Rangers strongly considered Vincent Trocheck for the captaincy as well. More on that in just a little bit. But, I mean, I guess in a way, this is a little bit of a consolation prize for Vincent Trocheck, but I still think it's a good choice. You know, we saw in recent seasons, as far as like guys that were leading this team, Trocheck certainly seemed to be in that role. The last 3 off the ice were always Trocheck and Mika and Kreider. You know, Trocheck would be there and he'd give the ice to Mika and Kreider last, but he would always be out there at the end. And, you know, again, I think it's a solid choice. If you're going to add an alternate captain, not that you absolutely had to, but, you know, if you're going to add one, I think Trocheck's your guy. As far as Mika and Fox and Panarin keeping their alternate captainships, I guess we can call it, it's fine. Now, again, I touched on this just a second ago, going to elaborate on it now. We did on this show throw out the idea of everybody being stripped of their letter coming into this upcoming season. It'd be a way to send a message to the locker room. This is not good enough. You guys did not do enough to earn or to keep your alternate captaincies. So we're going to start everything from scratch. I threw out that idea that you take away the alternate captaincy from everybody and you go into this season and you basically tell these guys, okay, you want to be the captain, go out there and earn it. You want to be one of the alternate captains, go out there and earn it. Everybody's on a level playing field. Everybody has a blank slate, but you got to impress the coaching staff, the new coaching staff. Now, did I think the Rangers would actually do this? No. And to be fair, the idea is a little bit out there. It would certainly be a bold idea. I can't really recall a situation where any NHL team has ever done this, where they just take a letter away from everybody. I'm not saying it's never happened. Can't really recall one. But if there was ever a team that needed to do something like that, it was the Rangers from this past season coming into this upcoming season. So again, I didn't really think the Rangers would do that. But honestly, you look at the lay of the land and you look at Fox remaining alternate captain and Mika and Panarin as well. Again, it's fine. I think taking away their alternate captaincies, if I really look at this objectively and rationally, it would do more harm than good. I do like the idea of open competition and allowing other, players to maybe step into those leadership roles for the Rangers. But if you take those away, I mean, you've got a locker room that already is borderline broken last season, or pretty much was broken. The vibes were in the toilet for this team, and you're going to come in as the new coach of the New York Rangers if you're Mike Sullivan and say, okay, I'm taking away the alternate captaincies from every veteran in this locker room that currently has one. I don't think that's going to go over very well. Now, I realize it's his choice, right? It's the Rangers organization's choice. You can't let the inmates run the asylum, so to speak. But I don't think you wouldn't be getting off on the right foot with your new players if you were to come in and that's like basically your first order of business. As far as Panarin remaining an alternate, look, he's only got 1 year left on his contract. If he leaves after this season in free agency, you can live with it for one more season. If he comes back, if you want to bring him back next season, for an extension, we've talked about that off and on throughout Locked On New York Rangers here. If you want to do that, probably the worst way to convince him to come back is to take away his alternate captaincy. You're not going to be doing yourself any favors if that's the road that you choose to go down. As far as Mika, it was bad last year. We know that. He did play better as the season went on, particularly when JT Miller was reacquired by the Rangers. Mika's under contract for 5 more seasons. I think you leave him as an alternate captain. But I will say this, if he falls back into his old habits and he looks like he doesn't want to be there this upcoming season, then by all means, take away the alternate captaincy going into the following season. But I'll give Mika a little bit of a break here. We'll see if he can rebound with a clean slate this season. Adam Fox, too. I mean, look, he's signed long-term. He's the elder statesman of the blue line. He's not the oldest Ranger defenseman, but he is becoming a veteran. He is a guy that's obviously been there longer than any of the other Ranger defensemen. And I think, he's obviously a tremendously important part of this team moving forward. And I mentioned this earlier, but there was a report from Vince Mercogliano on Twitter that apparently Chris Drury met with JT Miller, Vincent Trocheck, the rest of the leadership group on the New York Rangers, and discussed the idea that he was looking to name JT Miller the captain. And it sounds like all those Ranger veterans were on board with this move. And, Drury obviously has had his ups and downs as Ranger GM. I think that's very obvious. And one of the things that players took issue with was the lack of communication. Now, I think there have been a couple of times this offseason where Drury has shown, and again, if you dislike some of the things that he's done, I completely understand it, but it does feel like he's shown a willingness to do this. And he doesn't have to. He's the GM. He can do what he wants. He doesn't have to run every idea by the players. But trading Chris Kreider, he went to the veterans. He went to Kreider himself. He talked them through it. He talked about it. Obviously, here he did the same thing. So I think that's good. Obviously, there does seem to be better communication as these veterans asked for in the past year or so, the past calendar year, asking for better communication from the front office. But as Vince Mercogliano also pointed out, Miller and Trocheck are very close friends. So, I don't think Vincent Trocheck was going to fight this too hard. But it also sounds like, per Vince, that Vincent Trocheck himself, we mentioned this earlier, was given strong consideration to be the next captain. Obviously, it doesn't happen, but Trocheck will move forward as an alternate captain. And I'll throw one more question at you guys here before we call it. What is it going to look like when the Rangers win games this upcoming season? Because for years, we had, Mika and Kreider, they would do the hug after a win. Then Trocheck kind of jumped into the middle of it the past couple of seasons, and he would always be there and, high-fiving them and doing their weird little handshakes. And then Trocheck would leave, and we'd still get the Mika and Kreider hug. What's it going to be now, though? I mean, JT Miller's got to be out there, right? He's the new captain. Maybe Miller and Mika and Trocheck can do some kind of like secret best friends handshake or something along those lines. I don't know, but It's kind of a lighter question, but I am like genuinely curious to know what that's going to look like at the end of Ranger games next season, particularly after a win. But I guess we'll just have to wait and see. We'll call it there, though. If you guys would like to get in touch with this podcast, please send an email to lockedonnyrangers@gmail.com. Once again, that is lockedonnyrangers@gmail.com. Definitely give us a follow on Twitter as well, @jchick17. Once again, @jchik17. And definitely subscribe to the Locked On New York Rangers YouTube channel. Thanks again, guys. I will see you next time.